I want to start by applauding all of you guys for having survived to the end of the day. You guys are the Heracleses of the ancient world's day, the strongest, the bravest, and we are all here today to enjoy a bit of a light relief towards the end of the day, thinking about Heracles as a character, particularly in Greek myth and story. Now, a couple of times it has been referred to through the course of today, particularly this film, Disney's Hercules, the Romanized term as opposed to Heracles, the Greek term. And if you haven't seen Disney's Hercules, is there anyone in this room who hasn't seen Disney's Hercules? Wow, okay, right. So, homework. I am cancelling all homework as given by the teachers in this room. And your homework is to go in, and it's on YouTube, so there's absolutely no excuse. Go and watch immediately, as soon as you possibly can, Disney's Hercules. Now, it is 20 years old, but it is one of the best Disney adaptations. And we've been thinking all through the day about storytelling. And it does one of the best adaptations and uses of the ancient world to think about how you tell stories that I've ever seen done in any kind of film. Using Greek vases to move the narrative on, turning the muses into gospel singers, etc. And of course, you have at the center, you have Hercules, who is the all-round good guy, right? He is the great hero without imperfection, without negative, darker side. He is the guy who, as the ancient writer Aelian put it, saved the world for mankind, right? He made the world safe for mankind. This is the kind of character we should imagine. What I want to do for the next 25 minutes or so is offer you two different thoughts on Heracles. The first is that perhaps he's a little bit of a darker character than this version of him offers. And the second is to make the point that he gets around not just the Mediterranean world, but a much, much bigger ancient global world than you might imagine. And that's because one of my main things that I would like to say to you all studying classics now is you are the generation that will take classics on into the 21st century and define what it means to study classics in the future. One of the things I would really like you to be thinking about is how classics does not end when the Mediterranean ends. How the ancient Greeks and Romans were fully connected into the worlds of Asia, India, and China, and how they were part of a much, much bigger ancient global story. So I want to put Heracles into that story. But we're going to start with him in his youth, right? When he was a young lad, son of Zeus, as many of you will know, and the mortal Alcmene, almost killed at birth, right, for fear of Hera, but then brought before Hera by the goddess Athena, who will be always his saving grace, and given as a result of suckling at Hera's breast immortal divine power. He then gets raised by two mortals. His name was not Heracles to begin with. It was Alcides, right? He was given the name Heracles, glory of Hera, in order to try and placate Hera, his immortal enemy. And he grew up in Thebes in Boeotia, right? So here we have our map, our first triangular point on the map for where Heracles, we find the story of Heracles. He's right there in central Greece. When he was 8 months old, those snakes that were sent to kill him, he strangles them instead. And you can see that both in the Disney version and indeed in ancient Greek vase painting version. As a moody teenager, and this is our first point of the perhaps darker, shadier Heracles, he is supposed to have killed his music tutor, Licinus, who criticized his lyre playing. So for teachers out there, just be slightly cautious when you criticize your students, particularly the strong, brave amongst you who have stayed to the end of the day. And students, please don't follow the example of Heracles as you go forward. To atone for that, he's sent to tend cattle up on a mountain. And then, of course, he marries Megara, daughter of King Creon in Thebes. So we're still in Boeotia, right in the center of things. And he's then sent mad by Hera as part of her ongoing vengeance against him. He kills his children and he kills Megara. And he's about to kill his foster dad when Athena intervenes to knock him out cold. And if any of you are following politics at the moment, there's a couple of issues out there, general election, Brexit, that kind of thing. On the 9th of September this year, you may well have seen that the Irish Premier, Leo Varadkar, said to Boris Johnson, I want to be Athena to your Heracles in your Herculean task of Brexit that is ahead of you. Now, did he want to be the Athena who helps Heracles complete the 12 labours? Or did he want to be the Athena who knocks Heracles out cold when he needs to be knocked out cold? We were left to decide, and that's the beauty of Greek myth. There's often two ways to take any suggestion of what the story or motto is. And as many of you all know, as a penance for his crimes, or for being driven mad and thus committing murder, Heracles thus was ordered by the Delphic oracle to serve King Eurystheus, who's king of Tiryns. There we go, our second kind of map. He hasn't moved very far, you might think, for 10 years and perform any tasks that were required of him. And that's where we end up getting the 12 labours. And this is when Heracles starts to travel. So, first off, he has to slay the Nemean lion, and here we are, we're in Nemea, moving again, not hugely far. We've had our Boeotia where he starts off, he's come down into the Peloponnese. Then he's off, again, not very far, to kill the Hydra, right, the Linnaean Hydra with all its multiple heads. And then he's off to capture the golden hind of Artemis, again, he's not moving very far. He stays there in the Argolid. And then he's off to capture the Erymanthian boar. Does he go very far? All right. He's down a little bit into the deeper Peloponnese between Elis and Sparta, but it's not exactly a grand journey. And then he gets the joyous job of cleaning the Augean stables in a day for the king of Elis. So again, not very far. But it's here that we start to hear about alternative stories that Heracles gets involved in along the way. Because Elis is not very far from the sanctuary of Olympia and the Olympic Games. And we hear in Pindar, one of the ancient writers, that actually Heracles founded the Olympic Games. This is one of the alternative stories for how the Olympic Games get going, that Heracles had a hand in it. And he offered these games, it was said, in honor of his father Zeus, after he had taken vengeance on King Augeas with the Augean stables, who didn't pay him as he was supposed to for having cleaned them up. So this idea, again, of getting on the wrong side of Heracles. His music tutor did it because he criticized his lyre playing. Don't do that. Don't go back on a deal you've made with Heracles, because you're going to end up pretty much dead as a result. The Olympic Games might come out of it, so you may think it's a good deal, but at the end of the day, don't cross Heracles. He then starts to travel again. He's off to tackle the Stymphalian birds in northern Arcadia. Athena comes back to help him, gives him a rattle. So maybe Leo Varadkar was offering a rattle to Boris Johnson to help him deal with his Herculean task. Who knows? And now he moves further afield. This time he's got to go down to Crete to slay the Cretan bull and capture that bull as well. Then he goes completely to the other end of Greece. He's gone up to Thrace, kind of moving further up in the north. It's is that on the map? It's come off the top of the map, isn't it? To steal the mares of Diomedes, and then even further afield to take the girdle of Hippolyta from Queen of the Amazons. Now, where exactly the Amazons are is a point of contest. We've heard today about different places that they could have located themselves, but here we're putting them over in Asia, away and east of the entrance to the Black Sea. So we're starting to see a Heracles who's traveling further afield. But now I want to offer you some stories in which Heracles is involved, in which he goes even further afield. And it starts off with the last of his labours. He has to go and capture the cattle of Geryon over in Spain. And on the way back, we hear a couple more stories of the ways in which he gets roped into other things. So he's got those cattle, that's all good. Then he heads off to Liguria, where he apparently fights some giants. So he stops off in northern Italy. That's all, okay, understood. But then he actually supposedly visits Rome, right? The way in which Heracles gets wrapped up into all sorts of places that want him to be part of their narrative. And this goes a long, long way back in Rome's story. So we know, for instance, there was a temple of Heracles in Rome since the 6th century BCE, before it kind of Rome, as we think of it, was kind of Rome. There was an Aura Maxima dedicated to Heracles in the Forum Boarium, in the cattle market in Rome, linked in with the labor he'd been doing, going to get those cattle from Iberia. And there's even a Roman clan, the Fabii, who trace their genealogy to the daughter of Evander, a lady who lay with Heracles whilst he was in Rome. And we see this an awful lot, that alongside his tasks, he seems to find an awful lot of time to also create sons and daughters as well. So he was in Rome. But actually, he was also in Pompeii and Herculaneum. Herculaneum, called Herculaneum in honor of, you guessed it, Heracles, who came by. Pompeii, supposedly, or one kind of sense of the name of Pompeii, Pompeii procession, linking to the procession in honor of Heracles after he'd done away with a few more giants in the area. There's very handily, if you want Heracles to come and be part of your story, you first need to have some giants there as well, right, for him to conquer against. And the love of kind of Hercules, this is from the Ashmolean Museum exhibition, Last Supper in Pompeii, that you guys might have been to see or get a chance to see before it finishes in January. This is a small statue of Heracles that was found in one of the gardens of Pompeii. And this one, perhaps more famous in Rome from the 3rd century AD, the Farnese Hercules, a much, much enlarged copy of a 4th century BC original that stood in the baths of Caracalla. And we even have a Roman emperor, Commodus, who adopted Heracles as his personal champion, his personal divinity and god, right? So we may think that Hercules, as he was known in the Roman world, we don't think traditionally of his story being associated with the major towns and places of Italy, but by God, they made him so involved and incorporated him into their worlds. And it's in this statue, I think, we start to see that slightly different sense of Hercules and his darker side. If you met this guy on a dark night, obviously one would hope he was wearing clothes. But would you trust this man? Would you call this man the one who made the world safe for mankind? I'm not sure if you would. When you look at this guy, to me, he looks tired. He looks perhaps a bit drunk. He looks a bit like his power is just on the edge of falling out of his control. He looks like someone you don't want to get on the wrong side of, as his music tutor found out, as King Augeas found out, as others find out through his life. And then he's off again on his labors. So this time it's stealing the golden apples of Hesperides. Where to find those? Well, he took him past Prometheus. So he had a chat with Prometheus, the poor guy having his liver picked out by an eagle, set him free. Then he got a tip to go and find Atlas, who holds up the world. So he had to do that while Atlas went off to go and get the golden apples. And where was all this happening? Possibly, potentially, in North Africa, in the Atlas Mountains. So we've moved into Africa now. And then, of course, the final labor taking him to the underworld to go and get the three-headed dog Cerberus. Where did he go into the underworld? Somewhere near the end of the Mani Peninsula, back in Greece. Where did he come out? Up on the Black Sea. So we're starting to see a Heracles that really is traveling. By God, his air miles must have been fantastic. Right? We're seeing a guy who has both a darker side and a heroic side. We're seeing somebody who others want to be involved in their story. They're starting to claim Heracles and put him as part of their own narratives, founding the Olympic Games, being there responsible for the very naming of Roman towns like Herculaneum and linked to that with Pompeii, being a fundamental part of Rome's story and of its architecture all the way through its history. And that's just the 12 labors. And if I sort of ask you, what do you guys know about Heracles? You'd probably say the 12 labors. And what else? Anyone else got any other thoughts about what Heracles gets involved in during his time? 12 labors and then he sort of retires. He's done. Go for it. The Argonauts. Bang on. Absolutely. We get Heracles involved with the Argo. Absolutely. Spot on. He comes up in a couple of slides' time, so I'm going to get to the Argo in a little bit. Anything else that we know Heracles was involved in? Any other thoughts? Okay, let's fill in a few more stories that Heracles is supposed to get involved in, because it increases a little bit his travel, right, where he gets to in the ancient world. So we know that he also was back in Greece for a while, and he was staying with the king of Thespiae back in Boeotia. So he's back kind of in the heartland of where he started again, and he kills the lion of Cathairion. Right. While there, he gets given as a reward the chance to sleep with all 50 daughters of the king of Thespiae, but he's told he has to do it all in a single night. There's the 13th labour, as it's referred to, of Heracles. They all become pregnant, but of course they do. And they all bear him sons. The children of Heracles, the Heraclidae, who go on to become the ancestors of some of the key families that spread across Greece. So the kings of Sparta, the kings of Mycenae, all claim lineage back to this extraordinary knight of Heracles. And just in case that's not enough, I put another marker here over in Sardinia, because apparently he got told that he should send some of these children to go and found a colony in Sardinia. Right? So you have not Heracles, but you have his descendants heading over to found a colony in Sardinia. Then he falls in love, as if he wasn't tired enough, with the princess Iole of Oechalia back in Thessaly in mainland Greece again. But this time he cheated of getting his way and kind of having the daughter by the king and by the brothers who try to kind of cheat him out of giving him the prize, the girl. You'd think people would have realized by now that you don't cheat Heracles, right? Things end badly. So he killed them, the dad, the brothers, all bar one brother who was quite nice, right? And who had helped him. He abducted the girl, right? Hera then intervenes again to send him mad again. So he kills the one son that he didn't kill, the one brother he didn't kill before. He throws him off a wall. So he has to do servitude again. And this time he promises servitude to Queen Omphalia of Lydia. So Lydia, we're back into Asia, we're over here. Right? And this is my particular favorite. This is a later mosaic of Heracles serving Queen Omphalia of Lydia. And you might notice something a bit unusual about this. Anyone want to point it out for us? Hey? He's dressed as a woman and she's dressed in his lion skin and club. Yes, they did a clothes swap. For pretty much the 3 years of servitude, he had to wear women's clothes while she got to wear his lion skin. Then they got married, but of course they did. And they had children, of course they did, which gave rise to 22 kings of Lydia, but of course it did, right? So, okay. So we've got a Heracles who is fundamentally tied, not just across the Mediterranean, but equally into large parts of Asia as well. And if he hadn't had enough of marriage, supposedly he comes back to Greece again and marries one final time. And it's this time that sort of he gets caught up in the poisoned cloak that he puts on and which eventually kills him. And supposedly he sets fire to his own funeral pyre. So he sort of burns himself as he's dying on a mountain range in central Greece where it all began. But before that, he's had to join the Argo. Right? So he's had to go on another journey. He's there. He's off up on the Black Sea. He's up on the Sea of Marmara, makes it to Colchis in modern Georgia. He has to get off at Mysia, though. He leaves the Argonauts behind because he's lost a friend. So he goes off in search of a friend in Mysia over in Asia again. That's all fine. Did you know Heracles also attacked Troy? Yep, he's also in Troy. Right? So Heracles sacked Troy. He sacked Troy, having first done it a favor by, what do you think he did for them? Given what he did in Pompeii and Rome and Liguria and everywhere else? Exactly, killed a monster. Yep, absolutely. So he first turned up to help the city, killed the monster. But then, what happened? They didn't give him the thing they'd promised him. Does no one learn in the ancient world? And so he sacks the city of Troy. And he's responsible, supposedly, for killing all of the royal sons of Troy, except one, the guy who will be Priam, the guy who sits there as the old king of Troy when we get through into the Iliad. Right? So he's also been in Troy. Now, you might think this is enough, right? Heracles has done enough. But oh no, he hasn't even started traveling. We need a bigger map. So I put in some of the places that he's been around the Mediterranean on this map. But then just within the Greek sources alone, he's also supposed to have killed another king in central Greece, who again didn't give him what he was promised, right? He then killed another chap in Arabia because he didn't get what he was promised. And he killed another king in Egypt because, let's have it as a chorus, he didn't get what he was promised. There we go. Lovely chap, this Heracles. Just in case you thought he hadn't done enough, he founded a city, the city of Tarentum in southern Italy. So just in case you didn't think Italy had enough Heracles, have a little bit more. He helped reinstate one ruler back in Sparta. So he doesn't always kill the king. Sometimes he reinstates them. And in case that wasn't enough, he's also up in Scythia, up here. He's an ancestral hero, supposedly, there, because what do you think he did? He didn't kill a monster. That means the other option is he married, he had sex. Yes, yeah. So he had sex with a half woman, half snake in order to get his horses back that had been taken off him. Yeah, let's not work out how that happened, all right? Let's leave that kind of thing. Then he instructs her to make their sons, because of course there were sons, found Scythia. And this is Herodotus. Good old Herodotus tells us that Heracles was involved over in Scythia as well. Okay, is that enough? No, it's not enough, right? We go back over to the west very briefly because, of course, there's the Pillars of Hercules, where he set up 2 massive stone spires to stabilize the area and ensure the safety of ships sailing between the 2 landmasses. The African sources talk about the fact that he actually died in Spain, and his multicultural following then went off and popularized the whole Mediterranean coast of Africa. And if you were in Gaul, you could worship Heracles so Gaul near Marseille, you could worship Heracles in the temple of Heracles Monoikos, the lone dweller. Perhaps he couldn't find anyone to live with him after his record, right? And Monoikos has ironically given us the Principality of Monaco today, right? One of the richest, most tax haven places on the planet. So if you were happen to be multi-millionaire, tax recluse, you can go and live in Monaco and you can claim that you're doing so in image of Heracles Monoikos. Is that enough? No. You knew what I was going to say there, didn't you? We've got to go back again, and we're going east this time. And some of the stuff which I find most interesting and which I hope you will agree shows how much the ancient Greek and Roman worlds were connected into a bigger picture. We could go to Persepolis. We are over in the Persian worlds where there is graffiti. This is a drawing of a graffiti of Heracles. This is him. Now, you might go, hang on a sec, there's a big piece missing. And part of our job with these is to decide, do we think this is really Heracles or is someone pulling our leg? Right? And I want to vote for each one that I show you over the next 5 slides, because there are people who would claim that you can see images of Heracles all the way through into Chinese art. Right? We are not now dealing necessarily with places that Heracles himself got to, but we're dealing with places who wanted Heracles to be part of their story, right? Or at least individuals who wanted to make Heracles part of a particular location. So graffiti at Persepolis, now we might claim, and we know there were tons of Greek artists working at Persepolis, this is just a Greek turning up in Persepolis doing some graffiti. But what happens if we go to Behistun? Now here we're in Persian territory. This is the same place where Darius, the Persian king, has the massive rock-cut inscription of him and all his escapades. This is an important rock face to be inscribed on. And in the 150s BCE, we see Heracles being inscribed here. Now, the lion is earlier, right? Heracles is nicely sort of inscribed here. Club, okay. Yeah, would we agree this is Heracles? Hands up. Yes? Oh, God, you're a suspicious lot. Okay. Yeah, most people would say happily they would see this as a Heracles. And we know this was set up actually and carved by a Macedonian for the governor of the satrapy of Behistun, a guy called Cleomenes. But he's also got a quiver of arrows. Can you see that in the drawing? Now, arrows do come into Heracles' story in the Greek world. He shoots the Stymphalian birds. We see him with arrows quite a lot. But we see him much more with arrows in the East because it means that he overlaps with a Persian god, right, who is Verethagna. And Verethagna means giver of victory. So there is a start where you see Heracles as a divinity being overlapped, linked in with, and kind of made to equal gods of completely different worlds. Right? What about this one? Guy on the right. Named as Heracles. Yes or no? Hands up, yes? Oh, a few more of you. Okay, then the guy, the kind of thing. Yeah, we just about see a club, don't we? Kind of here, kind of thing. So people would normally happily say, this is Heracles acknowledging a local king in Komania, which is an ancient Armenian kingdom of the Hellenistic era, right? What about this guy? Yeah? Do we think Heracles? Hands up? Yeah? Yeah. I think we did. This is the lion skin over his head. Now, this is a turquoise cameo. The black and white picture doesn't really do it justice. A turquoise cameo that comes from Tilla Tepe burials of the 1st century BC AD. Tilla Tepe, where are we? We are right here, moving into what is now Central Asia, modern-day Afghanistan. Tilla Tepe burials relate to the Kushan rulers of the Kushan kingdom that ruled in Central Asia in the 1st century BC, 1st century AD period, and who chose to bury themselves with objects that had come both from China and from the Mediterranean, as well as up from India. Right? This seems to be a turquoise cameo where the origin of it, where it was carved, we can't quite be certain, but we know that these rulers want it as part of their burial assemblages in the 1st century BC AD. And this one I love. This is 5th to 6th century CE, Sassanid. Sassanid is the next empire kind of after the Parthian Empire, ruling in Central Asia through to Western Asia. And this is a gilt cup of Heracles tipping a boar onto King Eurystheus, one of those early labours. And in fact, this image, this exact image, is paralleled, if you remember back when I showed you the boar task, I showed you that exact image of Eurystheus in a pot having a boar tipped onto him that was from a Greek vase. So the very way in which to describe this Herculean labour, this task, this image, has carried not just through the centuries, from say the 5th century BCE to the 5th century AD, but has carried geographically all the way into the Sassanid Empire of Central Asia. What about this guy? We're finishing up in a couple of minutes. Because now we're moving into India. We're now in the Punjab. Yeah? It's a lion. Most people would say this is a lion down at the bottom. If you can't see, feel free to stand up and kind of see. This is Heracles standing on top of his lion. Kind of, yeah, this is 5th century BC. So we've gone back 1,000 years from that Sassanid cup, and we moved all the way to India, to the Punjab, and we are seeing these what are called scaraboids with images of Heracles, not just simply being made by Greek artists and transported around, but actually being created. And we hear in the 4th century BCE of Heracles doing one more foundation. Right? And this is in the Tales, the first history of India, written for us by the Greek writer Megasthenes, who in the 4th century ended up as the first ambassador to the court of King Chandragupta Maurya at a place called Pataliputra. And Pataliputra is here, which was the capital of the Mauryan state. And he says this: "Such then are the traditions regarding Dionysus and his descendants, current amongst the Indians who inhabit the hill country. They further assert that Heracles was born among them." Right? He's not Greek at all. He's actually Indian. Right? They assigned to him, like the Greeks, the club and the lion's skin. He far surpassed other men in personal strength and prowess, and he cleared sea and land of evil beasts. Of course he did. Marrying many wives. Of course he did. He begot many sons, but one daughter only. The sons, having reached man's estate, he divided all India into equal portions for his children, whom he made kings in different parts of his dominion. He was provided similarly for his daughter, whom he reared up and made a queen. He was also the founder of no small number of cities, the most renowned and greatest of which he called Palibothra, Pataliputra, the capital of where Megasthenes is based, which will be the capital of the great Mauryan Empire in the 2nd century, from the 4th century through to early 2nd century BCE. He built many sumptuous palaces, settled within its walls a numerous population. The city he fortified with trenches of notable dimensions, which were filled with water introduced from the river. Heracles, accordingly, after his removal from among the men, obtained immortal honor, and his descendants, having reigned for many generations and signalized themselves by great achievements, neither made any expedition beyond the confines of India, nor sent out any colony abroad. In the 4th century BCE, the Indians are believing that Heracles is theirs, and came along and actually founded most of the major Indian cities, including the capital of their current empire, as well as giving children which begat all of their rulers. And we can go further, right? Because by the 1st century BCE in Taxila, again in this area kind of northern India, what we would call the Gandhara region, we see this one. Now, if you're going to have a question mark, this is probably the one I would suggest is the biggest question mark. Heracles? Now, the people who argue for yes say there's a club here, and this is the looking down on the head of the lion skin. And there's a quiver of arrows. So this is possibly a Heracles overlapping with a divinity of the region. Possibly, possibly not. But this guy from Hada, and we see him also in Swat, this is Heracles, this time with a lightning bolt rather than a quiver or kind of his lion skin, overlapping with a divinity from Buddhism. So not just Zoroastrianism or Persian religion, but overlapping with a divinity, the Vajrapani, who is the protector of the Buddha. And we see this happening in any number of issues. What about this guy? This is a Buddhan image from the Gandharan region in total Indian style. Look at the sort of the posture, you might think that's Greek contrapposto. It's not. It's absolutely kind of Indian style Gandharan Mathuran art. Look at the halo around the head, very kind of Buddhist art, but there's a lion skin hanging over his head. And I want to finish with this one, which again, this is a stone weight. This is what wrestlers would have used to kind of work out their muscles with. And on one side, on the other side, it's got wrestlers, okay? Right? We know that Heracles was a protector of gymnasia, right? Kind of very Greek thing. Does anyone want to point out something really quite odd about this image? Go for it. He's fighting the lion, but the lion's not dead, but the lion's not dead, but he's already got the lion skin hanging over his arm. So, nice job. So what do we do with this image? How do we understand what the people were doing when they carved this image in northern, in the region of Gandhara in the 1st century BCE? Did they not know the story, right? You have to kill the lion before you can have the lion skin, duh. Or is this an entirely different story involving Heracles, where he's already got his lion skin, but this is a totally different lion, right, that we may not even have any literary reference to, but is appearing on this wrestler's weight that wrestlers were using to exercise with in northern India in the 1st century BC AD. So there we have it. Oh, and Pliny tells us that also, if it wasn't enough already, that down in Sri Lanka, Heracles was also worshipped right down here as well. And I haven't even started to show you the Chinese stuff that people claim he got to China. Heracles is often claimed as the pan-Hellenic deity, right? The guy who is worshipped both as a man, as a hero, and as a god, common to all the Greek world. But if there's anything I want you to leave here with today, it's first that doesn't go far enough at all. This is a divinity, a personage, a story, an idea that actually much, much wider than just the pan-Hellenic Greek world choose to be involved in, want to have as part of their story, and places in which the narrative of Heracles expands as these worlds of the Mediterranean, Asia, India, and indeed China mix over the centuries. And the second thing which I want you to take away from it is that if you do meet Heracles on a dark night, We don't think he came to Britain, but who knows? If you do, remember, don't promise him something and then not give it him. Thank you very much indeed, everyone.